The moment the automatic doors slid open at Sydney Airport, the vacation fantasy began to crack. You could see it on their faces. The smiles were still there, the excitement still buzzing, but so was the confusion. Australia wasn't behaving the way they expected it to. The signs didn't shout, the customs officers didn't joke, and the rules, the rules, were very real. This is where so many travelers quickly learn that Australia is not just America with kangaroos, and entitlement doesn't translate well at 35,000 feet from home. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. One of the first tales always begins at immigration. A loud voice, echoing just enough to turn heads. A man insisting that because he paid good money for this vacation, he shouldn't be questioned about how long he's staying or where he's going. The officer doesn't raise their voice. They don't argue. They simply pause, look up, and calmly explain that entering Australia is a privilege, not a right. That word, right, seems to trigger something. The traveler scoffs, mutters about freedoms, and jokes about lawyers back home. 10 minutes later, he's being escorted aside while everyone else moves on. Welcome to Australia, where confidence without respect is just noise. By the time tourists reach the city, the next culture shock hits fast. Restaurants. Menus without free refills, staff who don't hover, prices that reflect wages people can actually live on. One woman waves her empty glass like she's signaling an aircraft. When no one rushes over, she snaps her fingers. That's when the room goes quiet. In Australia, snapping at staff is a social sin. The waiter eventually returns, polite but firm, explaining that refills aren't automatic and tipping isn't expected. The look of disbelief says everything. She argues that back home, service works differently. The waiter nods and replies, "That's back home." The bill arrives unchanged by attitude. And then there are the beaches. This is where entitlement meets nature, and nature always wins. Bondi Beach glistens under the sun, but it's not a theme park. The red and yellow flags are there for a reason. Lifeguards warn swimmers to stay between them. Most listen, some don't. One tourist insists the ocean looks calm enough. Minutes later, the rip current proves otherwise. Lifeguards pull him out, coughing and shaken. Instead of gratitude, he complains that there should be better warning signs. The lifeguard, barely hiding a smile, explains that Australians grow up learning to read the ocean. The sea doesn't care where you're from. Wildlife encounters are another chapter. Australians never get tired of retelling. Kangaroos aren't mascots. Koalas aren't toys. Yet every year, someone tries. A tourist approaches a kangaroo for a selfie, stepping too close, invading space. The animal reacts exactly like a wild animal would. Suddenly, the story shifts from Instagram dreams to urgent medical care. Later, the same traveler complains online that the animal was aggressive. Australians read those posts with a mix of disbelief and dark humor. The rule is simple: look, don't touch. Nature here doesn't perform on command. Driving is where entitlement truly unravels. Australians drive on the left. Everyone knows this before they arrive. And yet, muscle memory takes over. A rental car pulls out, hesitates, then drifts the wrong way for just long enough to cause chaos. Horns blare. A police officer appears. The excuse comes fast: "I'm not used to this." The response is faster: "That's why you slow down." Fines are issued. Lectures are brief. Australia doesn't negotiate with confusion. Public behavior draws even sharper contrasts. Loud phone calls on trains, feet on seats, complaints about silence in quiet carriages. One traveler jokes that Australians are too sensitive. Another commuter calmly explains that shared spaces work because people respect them. There's no argument, just an awkward realization that being the loudest person in the room doesn't make you the most important. Then comes the tipping debate, which somehow always turns philosophical. Some visitors insist on tipping excessively to prove a point. Others refuse entirely, lecturing staff about service standards. Australians watch this with amusement. Here, workers are paid wages, not hopes. Tipping is optional, not a moral obligation. When a tourist demands to speak to a manager because their tip wasn't acknowledged enthusiastically enough, the irony is almost poetic. Shopping brings its own surprises. Sales tax already included in prices. Return policies that don't bend for tantrums. One man demands a refund months after purchase, insisting that the customer is always right. The cashier politely disagrees. In Australia, consumer protection exists, but so does personal responsibility. The phrase lands like a foreign language. Even humor doesn't always travel well. Sarcastic jokes about accents, casual comments about Australia being basically British America, assumptions that everyone knows US politics. The responses are polite but distant. Australians value banter, but it's earned. Respect opens doors. Arrogance closes them quietly. What ties all these tales together isn't nationality, it's mindset. Most American tourists blend in beautifully, curious and respectful, eager to learn. But the entitled ones stand out instantly. They arrive expecting adaptation instead of adapting. They confuse confidence with dominance. And Australia, with its calm enforcement of rules and unspoken social codes, becomes the perfect mirror. By the end of their trip, some leave frustrated, convinced the country was unfriendly. Others leave transformed, having learned that travel isn't about exporting your habits. It's about absorbing someone else's world. Australia doesn't shout its values, it lives them. Respect the land, respect the people, respect the rules. Do that, and the country opens up in ways guidebooks can't explain. So if you ever find yourself planning a trip down under, remember this: entitlement doesn't survive long here, but curiosity thrives. And sometimes, the best travel stories aren't about what you saw, but what you had to unlearn along the way. If you've enjoyed these tales or witnessed moments like this yourself, hit the like button, subscribe for more real travel stories, and share your experience in the comments. Because the world is a big place, and every culture has lessons waiting for those willing to listen. Just when you think the entitled behavior has reached its peak, the next level begins. And it's usually around the smaller, everyday frustrations that Americans never expected in Australia. Imagine a couple walking into a local cafe, convinced that ordering exactly what they want, in the exact way they want it, should bend the world around them. "Can you make this like Starbucks back home?" one asks. The barista smiles politely, explains that this is a local cafe with its own menu, and offers a suggestion. The response? A dramatic sigh, rolled eyes, and muttering about how hard it is to be understood in this country. Meanwhile, locals nearby exchange quiet smirks, recognizing a classic scene of cultural arrogance. Then there are the theme parks. Yes, even here, entitlement rears its head in full force. Australians follow rules, queue patiently, and respect each other's space. Americans in a hurry, however, sometimes treat lines as optional suggestions. Shoving past families, arguing with staff about wait times, or insisting on VIP treatment because they paid admission. These moments rarely end well. The consequences are almost immediate: denied entry to rides, security interventions, or public humiliation that spreads across social media faster than any Instagram post. What they thought would be a quick shortcut turns into a lesson in humility. Next comes the grocery store or supermarket experience, which can be a quiet battlefield of entitlement. Items have prices that include tax, self-checkout machines have limits, and there's no yelling required to get attention. Yet someone inevitably complains about scanning their own groceries, refuses to bag items themselves, or argues about local produce. When the cashier calmly explains that this is standard, the visitor acts shocked, as if Australia itself has conspired against them. And yes, locals notice, because patience isn't just a virtue here, it's a way of life. Finally, the cultural faux pas that tops all others: assuming American rights apply everywhere, standing on the wrong side of a moving escalator, insisting on speaking loudly in quiet train carriages, or even attempting to bring prohibited items into national parks. Every small act of defiance or misunderstanding becomes magnified in a country that quietly enforces rules with precision and calm. Some Americans leave frustrated, some embarrassed, and some enlightened. But almost everyone leaves changed, having learned the hard way that entitlement abroad is always noticed. Australia, in the end, doesn't need to shout to teach lessons. Every small interaction, from beaches to cafes, wildlife encounters to grocery stores, is a mirror reflecting attitudes back at travelers. And for those willing to listen and adapt, it becomes a trip full of unforgettable stories. But for the entitled, it's a series of humbling, sometimes shocking reminders that no matter where you come from, respect travels further than arrogance ever will.